Welcome to the 2020 New Testament Challenge. Today we're in the last chapter of the book of 1 Corinthians, chapter 16. Now, throughout the book of 1 Corinthians, Paul has been dealing with issues there in the church. He's been dealing with fights within the church, immorality in the church. He's been answering questions about lawsuits and spiritual gifts, resurrection. The church had many different issues, but Paul was answering all of those different questions. Now, in the very end of his book, he's giving final instructions. And there's two verses I'd like to have you key in on today. They're verses 13 and 14 of 1 Corinthians chapter 16. Paul says 5 things that he wanted the church to take note of and to put into practice, not only for the church there in Corinth, but these 5 commands are for us as well today. Listen to what Paul says as his final instructions to the church, closing out the first letter to the Corinthians. He says, "Be on your guard, stand firm in the faith, be men of courage, be strong, and do everything in love." The first thing he says is to be on your guard. Now, this is a military term. It was to be on your guard, ready for an attack to come. We need to be on our guard spiritually for erosion to take place. It's true that fire has a tendency to always go out unless it's stoked or more fuel is placed on that fire. We need to keep our spiritual fire burning by keeping attention to what's happening in our life. It's very easy to have erosion take place if we're not careful about what we're doing spiritually. If we neglect reading the scriptures, if we neglect time in prayer, our spiritual life will tend to erode away. Not only that, but we need to fight the tendency to be passive as well. We have to be active in our faith. We have to be active in continuing to grow, because if we're not growing, we're not changing, we're actually heading in the opposite direction. But I believe another aspect of this standing guard is to take God seriously. We have to be very careful that we do not become passive about following Christ, about obeying his commands. We need to take God seriously, take his word seriously. We need to stand guard, because Satan, what does he always want to do? Steal the word that has been sown in our hearts. We need to guard against that. The other thing that he says is to stand firm in the faith. I'm reminded in Joshua chapter 14 how Caleb came to Joshua and said, "I have been alive for 85 years. God gave me a promise when I was 40 years old that I could have the land that my feet set on in the promised land. Now, yes, there are giants in the land, but if God is with me, I can take that land." He was 85 years old at that particular moment in Joshua chapter 14, but he still was strong in his faith. Caleb said that I'm as strong now as I was then when I first entered the land. His faith had not diminished. He was ready for a battle. Even though the giants were in the land, he was going to face them because he knew that God was with him. He was strong in his faith. The third thing that Paul says is be men of courage. We need to stand strong, not afraid of what others would say, not afraid of what we might lose, but we're going to stand strong and courageous no matter what the cost, because we know that we want God to say to us one day, "Well done, my good and faithful servant." It doesn't matter what other people say. It only matters what God says when we see him face to face. The fourth thing that he says is to be strong. That means don't give up. Don't quit. Stay the course. So we stay strong. We stay committed. We stay faithful, and we stay guarded. The fifth thing that he says is to do everything in love. We need to make sure that we are putting 1 Corinthians chapter 13 into practice, to love like God loves. Everything that we do should be done in love. We can do all of these first 4 things, but we might have a wrong attitude about it. And then, as Paul said, we're just a resounding cymbal or a clanging gong. But if we have love, then we'll be patient and kind, long-suffering. We will not keep a record of wrongs. We will protect and trust, always hope, and always persevere. God's love never fails, and that's what God is calling us to. So in these last days, how should we be living? We should be standing our ground. We should be guarding our hearts. We should be standing firm in the faith. We should be people of courage. We should stay strong and not quit, but doing everything in love. If we do, we will make a difference in this life, and we will hear God say, "Well done, my good and faithful servant." Thank you for joining the 2020 New Testament Challenge.